The city reports more than 8,000 new cases of COVID-19. Maon moves further away from the region and the city springs back to life. And Japan's national police chief resigns over the fatal shooting of Shinzo Abe. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The city reported over 8,000 COVID cases today, reaching another new high in daily infection numbers. Health authorities said daily case numbers could soon reach 10,000, but they do not wish to tighten social distancing measures. Meanwhile, Director of Immigration Ao Wang has been infected with the virus. Timothy Lee reports.
Among the 8,579 newly reported cases, 8,282 are local infections. 15 new COVID cases were reported across 9 care homes. 70 close contacts now have to be quarantined at the Asia World Expo COVID-19 Treatment Center. The elderly care homes include Prince Edward's International Home of Age Limited, where 2 staff members on the 3rd floor were infected. 4 other residents on the same floor of the care home were infected, and 31 people had to be quarantined. Heung Hoi Ching Cochran Association's Buddhist Li Ka-shing Care and Attention Home for the Elderly in Wan Chai added 27 residents and 6 staff members to its infection cluster. The residents tested positive during their quarantine at the Asia World Expo Treatment Center. The total number of infections linked to the care home has now risen to 44 people. Tu Mun Hospital and Pokoi Hospital reported new infections in their general medicine and geriatric wards and have stopped receiving new patients. The hospital authority's wedding banquet cluster added another 5 doctors to its list of infections. 6 people have been affected so far.
We noticed that there is an accelerated speed of increase of cases in Hong Kong locally in the past few days. We hope that the increase will not be very rapid because this will affect our healthcare systems. But we also understand that if the increase in the number of cases further worsen, we might need to consider tightening some of the social distancing measures.
Meanwhile, Director of Immigration Ao Wang tested positive on his RAT test today and is currently undergoing a self-isolation period. The Immigration Department announced that Ao went to work today and adhered to anti-COVID measures. Today, 9 more COVID-related deaths were reported, involving patients aged between 70 and 108. They all suffered from chronic illness, and 5 of the deceased were not triple jabbed. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
13 private hospitals across the city have offered to provide at least 360 beds for non-COVID patients to be transferred from public hospitals, but the occupancy rate has been low. The private hospitals made the offer last week to allow public hospitals to free up beds for COVID patients as the number of new infections rebounded. But the occupancy rate of these private hospital beds has been low. Only less than half of them were in use as of Tuesday afternoon. The Adventist Hospital on Stubbs Road on Hong Kong Island reported a usage rate of between 0 and 5%. Secretary for Health Lo Chung-Mao said various factors affected the usage rate. For example, patients from public hospitals may fear that they will have to pay a higher fee after being transferred to private hospitals. Also, some private hospitals refuse to admit patients during weekends. Starting next Wednesday, all care home staff members must undergo nucleic acid tests every other day. That's an increase from having weekly tests after a surge in the city's COVID infections. Currently, care home workers can only get to work if they test negative on an RAT. Secretary for Labour and Welfare Chris Sun said, since care home staff members started doing weekly nucleic acid tests, data over the past 2 weeks showed the tests were able to identify 40% of the infections. He said there is a recent case where 100 care home residents were put into quarantine after several staff members got infected. Sun said such cases would lead to great pressure on quarantine facilities around town. A representative from the tourism sector said the easing of quarantine rules for incoming travellers has attributed to the surge in local hotel room prices. Christy Khan with more.
Many Hong Kongers are keen on enjoying a hotel staycation during the pandemic. But the recent surge in hotel room prices is making it an expensive option. This man said prices are now 20% more expensive compared with earlier in the pandemic. Another resident said it cost him around $2,000 to reserve a room now, but the room rate was $1,500 last time. A quick search found many hotels and hostels have raised their room rates lately. For example, a room for 4 people at a hostel in Sam Shui Po costs $700 per night, at least $300 more compared to last month. A 3-star hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui had also raised room rates, charging customers $700 per night. Also in the same district, this 5-star hotel charges $2,000 per night. The hotel sector said the rise in prices is related to the recent implementation of the 3+4 scheme, enabling inbound travelers to undergo 3-day hotel quarantine and then take a 4-day health surveillance. They added that hotels have received more bookings from mainland travelers. Most of them extended their room reservations for weeks while waiting to obtain quarantine slots before they can return to the mainland. More mainland travelers have arrived in the city since the easing of quarantine rules in Hong Kong on August 12. Timothy Chiu, the executive director of the Hong Kong Tourism Association, said some travelers have to stay in the city for an additional 8 to 10 days before they can catch their flights or shuttle buses back to the mainland. Additionally, some Hong Kongers prefer to do health surveillance in other hotels, meaning there has been a growing demand for hotel rooms. But he believes hotel room rates will drop eventually next month after the new school term has begun. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Severe tropical storm Maon has come and gone. It skirted within 200 kilometers to the southwest of Hong Kong early today, bringing strong winds and rain to the city. After being in force for around 14 hours, the number 8 gale or storm signal was replaced with the number 3 strong wind signal shortly after 9 a.m. As Maon moved further away, the observatory cancelled all tropical cyclone warnings at around 4 in the afternoon. At midnight in Hung Fa Chun, some residents wanted to experience the storm firsthand. Waves splashing against lampposts. Maon was closest to Hong Kong at around 3 a.m., coming within 190 kilometers of the city. This woman said she felt the wind pushing her backwards. Humans are curious in nature, though I know very well that I have set a very bad example by coming here to check out the situation, she said. Police and civil aid service personnel urged people to stay away from the shoreline. As dawn broke, Maon moved further away from Hong Kong. The sky turned clear in Hung Fa Chun, with waves eventually getting weaker. At around 6 a.m., the observatory said it would replace the number 8 gale or storm signal with the strong wind signal number 3 between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. The city sprang back to life as people returned to work. Some rushed to the bus stops early as it took time for the bus companies to resume full service. This time, the observatory announced the replacement of the number 8 signal just 35 minutes in advance. This woman said that gave people too little time to get ready for work. This woman said, "I'm a bit upset because I thought I won't have to work if the signal is lowered at around 11, and now I have to dash." Others said their company required staff members to return to the office within 2 hours after the number 3 signal took effect. The Labour Department has also reminded employers to make flexible arrangements and give employees more leeway to get to work. Many public services resumed operations within 2 hours after the number 8 signal was replaced, and vaccination centres reopened in the afternoon. Maon made landfall at Maoming City in Guangdong Province at around 10:30 this morning. The Guangdong Meteorological Public Service Center said the storm was weakening gradually after hitting land. It continued to move northwest into inland Guangxi in the afternoon. As a result of the storm, there was heavy rain in some parts of Guangdong and the Pearl River estuary today. Elsewhere, Japan's national police chief said today he would resign to take responsibility for the fatal shooting of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at a campaign speech last month. National Police Agency Chief Itaru Nakamura said he has given his resignation after his agency released a report on how it failed to protect Abe on July 8th when he was assassinated in Nara in western Japan. The police report found holes in Abe's police protection that allowed the attacker to shoot him from behind. The alleged gunman, Tatsuya Yamagami, was arrested at the scene and is under mental evaluation until late November. Yamagami told police that he targeted Abe because of the former leader's link to the South Korea-founded Unification Church, which he hated. In Malaysia, former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said that the disgraced former Premier Najib Razak is likely to receive a royal pardon and be released from a 12-year jail sentence for graft. Supporters of Najib Razak gathered outside the National Palace on Wednesday to seek a royal pardon just a day after he began his 12-year jail term. Opponents of the former Prime Minister, meanwhile, have launched an online petition urging the monarch to deny clemency. 69-year-old Najib lost his final appeal this week in a graft case linking him to the looting of 1MDB state fund 4 years after he was ousted over the scandal. Still to come on tonight's news. A Russian missile attack kills 22 civilians and set a passenger train on fire in eastern Ukraine. In Russia, a former mayor arrested for allegedly describing the war with Ukraine as an invasion. And in the U.S., Joe Biden announces a student loan forgiveness plan. Welcome back to TVB News. As Ukraine celebrated 31 years of independence, it was another deadly day for civilians in the war against Russia after a railway station in a small town was hit by rockets. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky paid tribute to fallen soldiers on National Day, while British Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a surprise visit to Kiev, bearing gifts. Nazvi Karim reports.
Both Russia and Ukraine have denied targeting civilians during the 6 months of war, and yet civilians continue to die in attacks on residential areas. First, a father mourns the loss of his 11-year-old boy, killed after a missile smashed into his house in the small town of Shaplin, 145 kilometers from Russia-occupied Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. Then, more than 24 people died when rockets hit the town's railway station and set fire to 5 carriages. Ukraine blames Russia for one of the deadliest days of the war so far for civilians, coinciding with Ukraine's Independence Day. The Kremlin has yet to respond to the accusations. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky gave details of the attack to the United Nations Security Council.
Russia has launched missiles against the Dnipropetrovsk region, against the railroad station, the railroad cars at the station. Unfortunately, the death toll could increase. This is our life every day. This is how Russia got prepared for this UN session.
Zelensky and his wife, Olena Zelenska, spent a solemn National Day paying tribute to fallen Ukrainian soldiers. After laying flowers at a memorial, they prayed at a church in honor of Ukraine's 31 years of independence and gave out awards to the spouses and children of Ukrainian soldiers killed in the war.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Also on Wednesday, Britain's outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a surprise visit to Kiev. Johnson promised Ukraine another $63.5 million worth of military support, saying Britain and Europe must not be economically blackmailed by Russian President Vladimir Putin when it comes to the energy crisis.
That if we're paying in our energy bills for the evils of Vladimir Putin, the people of Ukraine are paying in their blood. And that's why we know we must stay the course. Because if Putin were to succeed, then no country on Russia's perimeter would be safe.
The United States, meanwhile, pledged another $3 billion in weapons and equipment for Ukraine. Under-Secretary of Defense for Policy Colin Kahl said in a press conference. The Pentagon said it included 6 additional surface-to-air missile systems known as NASAMS, 24 counter-artillery radars, Puma drones and counter-drone systems known as Vampire. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
The former mayor of Russia's 4th largest city has been arrested, allegedly for describing the war with Ukraine as an invasion rather than a special military operation. In a continuing crackdown on critics of the war, Russian police arrested 59-year-old Yevgeny Resign, who was mayor of Yekaterinburg from 2013 to 2018. As he was being taken away by masked men, Resign told reporters he was being investigated under a law against discrediting the armed forces. He said he was being arrested basically for one phrase, the invasion of Ukraine. He faces up to 3 years in prison if convicted. Russian courts fined the popular Resign 3 times earlier this year on similar charges, paving the way for a criminal case the law authorizes for repeat offences. Resign, a sharp critic of the Kremlin, is one of the most visible and charismatic opposition figures in Russia. In the U.S., more than 40 million Americans could see their student loan debt reduced and even eliminated under President Joe Biden's long-awaited forgiveness plan. As Tracy Furness reports, the plan will help those with the greatest financial need.
Fulfilling a campaign promise, President Joe Biden announced on Wednesday that he is erasing $10,000 in federal student loan debt for those earning less than $125,000 a year or families earning less than $250,000.
Here's the deal. The cost of education beyond high school has gone up significantly. The total cost to attend a public 4-year university has tripled, nearly tripled in 40 years.
For those receiving the Pell Grant, which is reserved for undergraduates with the most significant financial need, the federal government will cancel an additional $10,000 in federal loan debt. Biden is also extending a pause on federal student loan payments through to the end of this year.
This has the potential to reduce federal student debt for tens of millions of people. So we know that there are 43 million Americans who have a combined $1.6 trillion in student debt, according to the Education Department. And the Biden administration says that this plan could eliminate entirely the student debt for more than 20 million people. And that's because most borrowers actually have smaller amounts of student debt. You hear a lot about stories about people who have $100,000 or more in student debt. But actually, about a third of borrowers have $10,000 or less, and more than half have $20,000 or less. So for those borrowers, this could really take out all or a very large chunk of their federal student debt.
The move could boost support for the Democrats in the November congressional elections. Some economists are saying it may fuel inflation, and some Republicans in the U.S. Congress question whether the president has a legal right to cancel the debt. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin has apologised for a picture that emerged from a private party thrown at her official residence in July. The suggestive picture involved 2 well-known female influencers. Marin told the press the picture was not appropriate and should not have been taken. However, she said, otherwise, nothing extraordinary happened at the get-together. The apology comes after the Finnish leader reported a negative drugs test in the aftermath of the release of video footage last week showing her singing and dancing with Finnish celebrities at another party. Finns have been divided over the Prime Minister's behaviour. Some have voiced their support for her attempts to strive for a work-life balance. Others have questioned whether Marin's leisure activities could hinder her performance in office. To sports now, the widow of late basketball star Kobe Bryant has been awarded $16 million by a jury over the sharing of photos of human remains at the helicopter crash site where her husband, their 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 others were killed in 2020. This comes after Vanessa Bryant had sued Los Angeles County, alleging invasion of privacy. She accused members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's and Fire Departments of sharing gruesome images of the crash in unofficial settings. Vanessa Bryant has also filed lawsuits against charter company of the helicopter involved in the crash and the deceased pilot's estate. The crash took place in Calabasas, California on January 26, 2020. NBA great Kobe Bryant was 41 at the time of his death. During his stellar career, the Los Angeles Lakers legend and 18-time All-Star won 5 NBA championships. That's the news. Thanks for watching.